How ancient humans survived the deadliest winters. Picture waking up starving, fingers numb, breath frozen in the air. Outside, the cold is so severe that 10 minutes without shelter could kill you. Stretch that morning into your entire life every year for thousands of years straight. No heating, no insulated walls, nothing between you and death except what you could hunt, sow, or burn. This was daily life during the Ice Age. Here's the uncomfortable part. Dropped into that frozen world tonight, with everything you know, you would probably be dead within a week. Not because you lack intelligence, but because knowledge alone was never enough. Surviving the Ice Age demanded adaptations so extreme it sounds unbelievable today. To endure it, our ancestors did things that sound less like survival and more like horror. Most people underestimate how brutal this era truly was. At the peak of the last Ice Age, roughly 20,000 years ago, temperatures across huge regions were far colder than anything we experience now. Massive sheets of ice buried enormous stretches of North America, Europe, and Asia. Entire landscapes vanished beneath frozen white deserts, silent, endless, and unforgiving to anything trying to survive on them. Humans had evolved beneath the warm African sun, yet suddenly found themselves battling conditions closer to modern Siberia than anything our bodies were built for. We had no thick fur, no blubber, no natural shield against brutal cold. Against Ice Age winters, the human body stood completely outmatched. Everything that kept our ancestors breathing had to be invented, stolen, or torn from other animals. Which brings us to the first dark survival strategy, wearing the dead. Early humans quickly learned their own skin offered almost no protection against Ice Age winters. So instead, they took the skin of other creatures. Animal hides became the only real barrier between a human body and freezing to death. And it wasn't just any fur. Evidence suggests humans relied on bear hides for hundreds of thousands of years. Think about what that required. To get a bear hide, you needed to kill or scavenge from one of the most dangerous predators in your environment. Then strip it, clean it, wear it, and sleep inside it at night. Your survival depended on wrapping yourself in the skin of a creature that, under different circumstances, could have killed you instead. For tens of thousands of years, clothing stayed crude. Loose hides were draped over the body, tied on, effective enough to keep someone alive, but never enough to keep them comfortable. Comfort was never the point. Survival was. Because in temperatures, this extreme, exposed skin doesn't just ache. It dies, blackening, going numb, falling away without warning. There were no second chances once damage set in. Around 30,000 years ago, a tiny invention changed everything. The needle, carved from bone or ivory, was small enough to fit in a closed hand, yet powerful enough to reshape human survival. For the first time, people could sew clothing that fit their bodies, trapping heat instead of letting it leak into the cold air around them. Instead of draping loose hides over their shoulders, people could now create fitted layers that trapped body heat and blocked cold air. Clothing made from reindeer, fox, and other hides became far more effective at keeping people alive. This might not sound revolutionary, but it likely helped entire populations survive in places they otherwise never could have settled. Yet every piece of clothing still came with a hidden cost. Every coat, every glove, every layer meant another animal had died nearby. Someone spent long hours processing that hide with crude stone tools, standing outside in the same freezing cold they were desperately trying to escape. Nothing about staying warm was ever simple. Here's where things get darker. The shelters people lived inside. In many Ice Age landscapes, there weren't always forests for wood or caves offering protection. So humans built shelter from the only large material available: bones. Specifically the enormous bones of woolly mammoths scattered across the frozen ground around their camps. Across Eastern Europe, archaeologists have uncovered ancient structures built entirely from mammoth skulls, ribs, tusks, and other skeletal remains. These weren't random piles of bone. They were carefully designed homes, layered with hides and packed earth to block wind and trap warmth. Humans were quite literally building their houses out of skeletons. Imagine falling asleep inside a structure built from skulls, ribs, and curling tusks. Wind howls outside the walls. Snow piles against the bone framework. And the only thing separating you from freezing to death is the skeleton of an animal that once weighed several tons. For Ice Age humans, That wasn't a nightmare. It was simply home. Perhaps the darkest theory of all isn't about what our ancestors killed. At a site in Spain known as Sima de los Huesos, the pit of bones, researchers found evidence suggesting ancient humans may have endured extreme physiological stress. Some scientists have proposed that ancient humans occasionally entered a state resembling hibernation, a dramatic slowing of activity and metabolism during winter's harshest stretches. The evidence remains debated, and many researchers reject the idea. But the fact that scientists are even discussing it reveals how extreme Ice Age survival may have been. Imagine a winter so brutal that staying alive required your body to change how it worked, just to conserve enough energy to reach spring. Not everyone survived this era. As the Ice Age dragged on, our closest relatives, the Neanderthals, slowly disappeared entirely. These were humans who had spent hundreds of thousands of years adapting to cold European climates, and in many ways were better suited to the cold than we were, yet they still vanished completely. Climate instability, shrinking food supplies, and fierce competition for scarce resources likely pushed their populations beyond recovery. Eventually, an entire branch of humanity disappeared from the earth. Modern humans survived this era. Neanderthals, despite every advantage, ultimately did not. Scientists still debate exactly why, pointing to technology, social networks, or a mix of small advantages. How did our ancestors survive conditions that destroyed so many others? The answer wasn't a single invention. It was cooperation. Archaeologists have found tools, ornaments, and materials hundreds of miles from where they originally came from, proving distant human groups stayed connected across incredible distances, even in the harshest environments on Earth. Those fragile connections meant trade, shared information, mutual support, and sometimes literal survival during desperate moments. If one group faced starvation, another might step in to help. In a world this hostile, cooperation wasn't simple kindness. It was a survival strategy, quite possibly the single greatest survival tool our species ever developed. Put every piece of this together, and the picture that emerges isn't one of clever invention alone. It's desperation disguised as ingenuity, wearing the skins of dangerous predators because your own skin couldn't protect you, building homes from the bones of giants because nothing else was available, possibly pushing the human body to limits we're still struggling to understand. We tend to imagine our ancestors as primitive and simple, but survival at this level required something closer to brutal genius. Every invention, every fragile alliance, every desperate adaptation was built directly on top of starvation, frostbite, and fear. Nothing came easily. Nothing was guaranteed. Every day demanded a fight just to reach the next sunrise alive. Tonight, when you pull a warm blanket over yourself and complain that it's cold, remember something. Your ancestors survived winters so brutal that an entire other human species disappeared inside them. They wore the dead, slept inside skeletons, and endured conditions that would kill most modern people within days. You're warm tonight because they refused to surrender to the cold, generation after generation, until that determination reached you.